Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Committee of Adjustment meeting for the Township of Georgian Bay for April 14, 2022. This morning, there's a public meeting scheduled for one minor variance application. I'll briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the Secretary Treasurer will advise the committee as to when, how, and to whom notice of each of the hearings was circulated for the application being considered. Next, our planning staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the application and provide any information that is relevant. The Secretary Treasurer will summarize any correspondence on file, and from there, the applicant may make a brief presentation if they so choose, and the public will have an opportunity to speak to the application being considered. After the public forum, the committee will then deliberate on the proposed application and consider a motion to pass, defeat, or defer the decision. The minor application being considered this morning is A21-35 for 333 Steep Rock Road. Before we begin, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. I expect at this point everybody's had an opportunity to review the minutes from our March 18, 2022 meeting. I have a motion before me, moved by Member Demkew, seconded by Member Matthews. I'll read the resolution. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves the minutes of March 18, 2022 as circulated. All those in favor? The motion is carried. An additional resolution in regard to today's agenda. It was moved by Member Ferguson, seconded by Member Matthews. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment adopts the agenda dated April 14, 2022. All those in favor? The motion is carried. And I would ask the Secretary Treasurer to provide us with an overview regarding notification.
Notice of each of the applications was sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 meters, 500 meters, or 800 meters, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. The notices were sent at least 20 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and a key map showing the location of the property. Other relevant information may also have been provided. These circulations were provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act 1990.
Thank you, Marcia. Do we have the applicant present in the meeting this morning?
The applicant has indicated that he will be attending, Mr. Chair.
Yes, the applicant is in attendance today.
I've just let them in, so maybe a couple seconds before you see them over.
Okay.
But they are here.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I see Mr. Wes Fulford in attendance.
Morning.
Good morning, sir, and welcome to the Committee of Adjustment meeting for April 14th. Before we begin, I'll just summarize. The planner will provide us with an overview of the application, and from there you may add any additional comments that you find are appropriate. If there were any members of the public in attendance, which I don't see any, they would have an opportunity to address the application as well. Following that, the committee will deliberate on the application and consider a motion to either pass, defeat, or defer. With that, I would ask our planner to give us an overview, and our planner today is Joshua DiCario. Go ahead, Josh.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I will share my screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Marcia or Sydney, I'd like to share my screen.
You should be good now.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, Can I get a thumbs up if you can see my shared screen? Perfect. So good morning, committee. Morning, Chair Hill, all in attendance today. I will be presenting the minor variance application before you today. Application A2135 Fulford. So the applicants today are West Fulford and Noel Fulford. The address is 333 Steep Rock Road. And to provide a brief overview, so the purpose of the application is to permit a height increase to a detached garage with sleeping cabin above. The minor variance is to permit a total garage height with a sleeping cabin above of 5.7 meters, where 5.1 meters is permitted by decision 82106. The applicant previously applied for multiple minor variances to the Committee of Adjustment and was granted approval in decision 82106. The application was approved to permit the construction of a replacement dwelling with a front yard setback of 7.5 meters, a front yard setback of 5.1 meters to an attached deck, a maximum gross floor area of 262.5 square meters, and a maximum width of 18.7 meters, and to permit the construction of a detached garage with a sleeping cabin above on a lot with an area of 0.29 hectares, a rear yard setback of 2.5 meters, and a maximum building height of 5.1 meters. The proposed height increase on the detached garage with the sleeping cabin above appears to have already been constructed. And I will now move on to the next slide. The applicants are seeking a 0.6 meter increase in height to the detached garage with sleeping cabin above. As per 4.1.15C of the zoning bylaw, they're permitted 5 meters. However, as I already stated, the went to Committee of Adjustment for approval in 82106 for 5.1 meters and received approval. The slide in front of you today, location map, will show the location of 333 Steep Rock Road. The lot is zoned SR6. It is located within the 6 Mile Lake Inland Waterfront community. Surrounding the lot are shoreline residential properties, and to the rear of the lot is Crown land. The property has water access and private road access as well. So the site plan shows the current layout of the property. The detached garage is located here. The septic system is located here. The principal dwelling is located over here, and there's a floating dock. And I will transition or pivot my screen to show you or provide a background to the previous applications that were submitted and the previous history of this minor variance application that you have before you today. So previously, the applicant received planning and building approval to construct a principal dwelling and detached garage with a sleeping cabin above following the decision of 82106 and the completion of the recommended conditions. On November 30th, 2021, planning staff received building permit revisions that included a bump out and located at the front of the principal dwelling. So you'll see it here, the general location of the bump out. The bump out did not comply with the zoning bylaw 2014-75 and the approved minor variances of 82106. The bump out increased the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, reduced the front yard setback, and increased the lot coverage. Planning staff informed the applicant of the bump out non-compliance, and the applicants submitted a minor variance application on December 14th, 2021. An order to comply was issued by the building department to the applicants for the principal dwelling on December 17th, 2021. On March 6, 2022, the applicants amended the minor variance application that was submitted on December 14th, 2021. The amendment removed the proposed bump out on the principal dwelling, and the applicants are requesting relief for the height of the detached garage sleeping cabin above. So I will just provide more information. These are the original, these are the revised drawings, architectural drawings that was provided. And here you'll see the bump out, which will reduce the setback, the approved setback of 82106 and increase the GFA. And I will transition to the attachments that were provided with my report. And here are the site photos of the detached garage. So the detached garage appears to be fully constructed and nearing the rough-in stage. And I provided various photos of the impact of the detached garage from the shoreline, as you can see here and here as well. And then as I move on, these photos that you see before you are the the constructed foundation of the principal dwelling. As I previously stated, there's a current order to comply on the principal dwelling for this bump out. I also want to mention that the revised drawings to increase the height of the detached garage with sleeping cabin above appears to be an architectural reasoning, and I believe the applicant stated it was an architectural design error. So there appears to be no increase to the floor to ceiling height of the sleeping cabin area. However, it appears to be as a result of the architectural design of the detached garage with sleeping cabin above. So Development Services Report 2022-31, staff are recommending approval of the application subject to the recommended conditions. The proposed height increase to the detached garage with sleeping cabin above is structural and appears to not increase the floor to ceiling height. The proposed height increase has minimal visual impact from the shoreline. And I also reviewed the Provincial Policy Statement 2020, the District Official Plan, Township Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw, and planning staff are of the opinion that the subject application conforms to and does not conflict with any of the applicable planning policy documents and meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. Now, the reason why I presented you information on the principal dwelling was to provide that background in terms of what's existing on the lot, what currently is constructed on the lot, and what is intended to be constructed with the building permits that were approved. So as you may have known already, the zoning bylaw allows for lots zoned with SR6 to have a permitted use of a detached dwelling. A detached dwelling needs to exist before any accessory buildings or structures. A detached dwelling will also need to exist with a sleeping cabin at the same time. Oh, sorry, not a sleeping cabin, my apologies, a septic system. And that's something that I reviewed in my report on what currently exists on the property and what is expected to or approved to exist as well. So as you already saw with my site photos, the existing detached garage or sleeping cabin above appears to be constructed. The principal dwelling is at its foundation stage with the bump out, and the site visit was conducted March 29th, 2022. So if there were any changes, I would like to mention that now. And I just want to put into perspective that the principal dwelling needs to exist with the septic system before a sleeping cabin or a detached garage exists. So that goes into my decision making on my conditions, which we'll see before you currently. So I presented 3 options. Staff are recommending approval for this application, but I did present 3 options for the committee to consider. So the first option be resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Community of Adjustment approve minor variance application 82135 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 for 333 Steep Rock Road to permit an increase in the maximum permitted height for detached garage with a sleeping cabin above of 5.7 meters, where 5.1 meters is permitted by 82106, subject to the following: that municipal taxes be paid to date, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan, extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application, and that the applicant resolves the issue of non-compliance related to the bump out on the principal dwelling to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and the Chief Building Official, and that all fees and disbursements, legal, engineering, planning, if any, incurred by the township will, with respect to this application, be paid for by the owner, and that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. As I already stated, planning nor building provided approval for the revised bump out, and also we did not provide approval from the building permit perspective for the increase in height. However, they are permitted that 5.1 meters increase. 5.1 meters total height of the detached garage or sleeping cabin above as per 82106. There are 2 other options as well. Option 2, to defer the application until the applicant resolves the issue of non-compliance related to the bump out on the principal dwelling to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and the Chief Building Official. And then option 3, to deny the application. I do want to mention that the applicant in my previous communications is willing to bring the issue of non-compliance into conformity with the zoning bylaws. So that's important to consider. And I believe the applicant will discuss that in their time. That concludes my presentation today. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Josh. And I see the applicant is present. And is there anything that you wish to add to the planner's comments at this point?
Chair Hill, I just need to speak to the correspondence.
Oh, thank you.
No correspondence has been received regarding this application.
Thank you, Marcia. Mr. Fulford, is there anything you'd like to add to the planner's comments?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for everybody's time today and great presentation, Josh. I think the planning committee would, or planning department would echo my comments in terms of like our desire to operate with transparency and, you know, keeping all parties informed of proceedings up north. Like most cottage owners, we are managing this project remotely, which has been challenging at the best of times. I just wanted to provide some comments on the general intent with the build. The septic system has been started. The excavation is complete. We have to obviously acquire the holding tank units and complete construction of the field, but the septic system, the principal dwelling and the accessory structure, the intent was to progress all components at the same time. So, you know, benefiting from the economies of scale, efficiencies of pouring two foundations at the same time, site excavation, etc. So we stopped construction of the principal dwelling probably the second week of December, when we learned that we would have to go back to committee for what had been done. The bump out, I can share a screen here, but if you go back to those photos, or if you've got it in front of you, I think it's on slide 13, there's a good picture of what's actually been poured. There's actually two walls that have been poured. One is the permitted front wall that meets the required setbacks for 7.5 meters. And one is the 24-inch extension, the bump out. And the intent with that bump out was to accommodate, so yeah, perfect. There's two walls there. So the intent was the reason why we needed the bump out was to accommodate a roughly 48-inch deep firebox unit, to avoid having that firebox sitting or abutting the living room furniture essentially. And this bump out, when we started this process about a year ago, was supported by your former director of planning, and obviously there's been some turnover within the department, and the individual that took it over prior to the variance meeting last July, Brad, who's no longer with you, unequivocally did not support the bump out, despite the fact that this bump out does sit about 6 feet back from a former deck that was sit there, which will no longer be part of the new construction. So we removed it to maintain the committee of adjustment sort of placeholder and schedule in July so we could begin this project. But as soon as it was poured, we immediately went to planning and the building department and basically began discussions around whether or not we could get an amendment. And unbeknownst to me at the time, you know, if the amendment resulted in a reduction of a setback, a minor variance approved setback, we'd have to go back to committee. So we thought long and hard about that, submitted an application to committee in December prior to receipt of the stop work order, and no work has been completed since that point. And subsequently engaged new engineering and new architecture firms to rescope floor plans and window schedules to figure out how to go about this without the need for the bump out and still accommodating those firebox units. So it has been poured in a fashion where we fully intended to cut it off, the 24-inch extension, with a concrete saw or whatever utility available, and proceed to construct with the permitted front wall that's shown there that does meet the setback requirements. So as soon as we have redone the architectural design, I'm 2 or 3 days away from engineering approval or sign off on the new construction. It's really just rescoped window schedules and floor plans. We will not require the bump out. We will either cut it off or we will demo that front wall and redo it according to the new sort of window schedules and firebox layout to to proceed and move forward with this project in compliance with the permitted variances on that structure. So our desire is to continue to proceed with both structures, the detached accessory structure as well as the principal dwelling, as soon as possible. We started construction in September last year with the desire to hopefully have a residence for this summer. Obviously, that's not happening. And just want to get this thing moving as quickly as possible in a very transparent fashion. And again, to Josh's point, on the variance at hand today, the wall plates and ceiling heights have been framed to spec as per the permitted structure or building department approved structure. The height increase is solely driven by a truss that when rubber hit the road and the component was put into production, they ended up being 26 inches versus 11 7/8 inches as designed. And that's led to the building height. And that was a structural requirement to support snow loads, et cetera. And, you know, had I been involved in the shop drawings and sign off, I may have caught it, but again, we're managing this remotely. And it wasn't until I did a site visit post framing that we put a tape to it, and we're wondering why this thing is so high. So framing, sorry for the long-winded response here, but the framing inspection has been completed. We likely could have driven on. The risk to us is that I don't want to put any more money into the roof, insulation, electrical, et cetera, in the event that at some point somebody tells us to rip it down. So wanted to proceed with full transparency, ask for forgiveness for what is more or less a requirement at this point, not a want or an ask. So with that, I'll turn it over to you and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I see Noelle Fulford as well. Is there anything that you wish to add, Noelle?
No, I think Wes did a good job. Thank you.
Okay. I see no members of the public in attendance. So with that, I will close the public session of the meeting and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And we will begin with Member Demkew.
Thank you, Chair Hill. Their presentations really helped me understand the reasoning for the application, so that helped. I did visit the site, and certainly the slight variance in height is not going to affect visually at all. It's well concealed, so I have no problem with this. I think the applicant has done everything they can to explain the situation, so I'm okay.
Okay, thank you, Member Demkew. I might just add a question of clarity here to Mr. Fulford, or perhaps to Joshua, and it has to do with the timing of the condition that the planning department would like to add to the approval of this application. And it's the timing. If in fact, what you had to say earlier, Mr. Fulford, are you able to, do you feel confident in being able to go forward and getting the approval of the building department to proceed with removing that bump out and getting back into construction within the next 30 days?
Yeah, we're obviously under half load restrictions. So there's considerations around equipment and trucks and what needs to be done on site, but we're 2 or 3 days away from having stamped engineered drawings for the sort of rescoped principal dwelling. And again, it's really just window schedules and floor plans. So nothing really, not a significant tangent from what's been approved, and have spoken to Josh about the path forward, as well as our chief building official. As soon as I have those drawings, we will send them to the building department for approval. And then they would go over to planning, as I understand it, for verification that we are building within that approved envelope, so setback and width, et cetera. And the new scoped drawings, without question, do meet the requirements or operate within that permitted envelope. And at this point, am crystal clear on what needs to be done and how to address it. So we've got a path forward. So I would expect to be able to send those drawings over to planning or building within a week, at which point we'd get Josh to review.
Okay, so we're going to be within that 30-day window that we're talking about, or somewhere close to that. I see a hand up there from Josh. Would you like to add something to that, Josh?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair Hill, I just wanted to also add that I worded the conditions in a way that the Planning and Building Department would like to resolve the issue of non-compliance. So instead of stating that we want it to be removed or we want it to be brought forward to the committee again in the future meeting to address that issue of non-compliance. So the wording of the conditions allow for that issue of non-compliance to be resolved, whether it be through removal or redesign, as West Fulford has mentioned already.
Okay, and the reason for those questions is the difference between taking into consideration the option there to defer, and I get this distinct feeling that planning services and the applicant feel confident that they can get that resolved in a very timely manner. So, all right, I'm clear on that. Back to the committee again for any questions or comments. Member Caddo.
Thanks, Chair Harold. I was up yesterday, had a look at it, and definitely the height's not going to be a problem if it's well hidden from the lake with all the trees. The question I had was for Joshua. So the garage can't be built before the cottage, let's say, is what you're saying. So how far along does the cottage have to be before you can start the construction of the garage?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Hill. The concern that the planning department has with this current application is that we currently have a detached garage with sleeping cabin above that's nearing completion, with a principal dwelling that it's currently at its foundation with an order to comply on it that will, as of right now, not receive planning nor building approval until that issue of non-compliance is resolved. So the issue and concern from the planning end is that because of the lot itself and the permitted uses on the lot itself, which is to permit a principal dwelling, and then everything else is accessories and buildings and structures. The planning department wants to ensure that the principal dwelling continues to move on with its progress and is resolved to get into compliance with the zoning bylaw before formal approval is provided. And that's why we provided that condition as a formality, so that the Committee of Adjustment considers that currently we have a detached garage with sleeping cabin above that's nearing completion, with a principal dwelling that's still at its foundation with an order to comply on it. So we just want to make sure that that concern that the planning department has is addressed, and at the end of the day, the committee can decide to remove the condition if they wish, but that is a condition that the planning department wants to move forward as sufficient for this application.
Okay, so there's no, if he was framing his cottage, there's no problem with him building the garage at the same time. Like, it's nothing, cottage has to be first, or it's
Yeah, through you, Chair Hill, the concern relates to the fact that we have a principal dwelling at its foundation with an order to comply on it. And this variance, although I do recognize is strictly to do with the detached garage or sleeping cabin above, we want to ensure that other issue of non-compliance that influences that detached garage existent is addressed as well. So to answer your question, they received building permit approval for the principal dwelling, for the detached garage or sleeping cabin above, for the septic system, and the demolition of the existing dwelling in 82106 and the subsequent building permit applications that went through planning department and the building department as well. So they received that approval already. We just want to address at this time, since we're discussing an accessory building, we want to make sure that accessory building is approved based off of the principal dwelling as well, and taking that into account as well.
okay.
Okay.
Well, okay, I'm good with that. Thanks, Joshua. Yeah, I'm okay with this this application. I'll support it.
Thank you, Member Caddo. Again, just back to you, Joshua, for clarity. Does the order to comply apply to all construction on site?
The order to, sorry, through you, Chair Hill, the order to comply applies to the principal dwelling. And that's something that the chief building official with the building department issued. So that's not the planning department that issued that order to comply. But I believe the building department recognized that we have currently forms of the principal dwelling that's constructed, that's not to the approved drawings. So that order complies from the building perspective, and that order to comply was issued by the chief building official, I believe, in December of 2021.
Okay, so if the application for the increased height is approved, the applicant can proceed with further construction on the garage with the sleeping cabin?
Through you, Chair Hill, if the committee decides to approve the application today, the next step will be to ensure that the conditions are met. And one of the conditions is to resolve the issue of non-compliance with the principal dwelling. Once that's resolved, that condition is fulfilled. And as such, the planning and building department can review the revised drawings of the detached garage with sleeping cabin above and provide our approval then. So we have to ensure that the conditions are met, and that's why I included that condition to resolve the issue of non-compliance, so that once that condition is met, then I can provide, or the planning department and the building department can review the revised architectural drawings and provide approval if necessary.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarity. I see Mr. Fulford with his hand up. Do you wish to add some further comment?
Yeah, I would just want to clarify. So the cottage and the garage, the principal dwelling and the accessory structure are basically at the same stage, with the exception of the fact that there's 6 days of framing completed on the garage. So it's framed with the OSB or zip panel system exterior, but we're waiting on windows, we're waiting on doors. Everything's got 5-6 month procurement timelines right now. So it's in the queue, but it's you know, to try and put all the pieces together and get this, bring this together along the sort of same timelines. It's obviously been a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, we are months away from completion of the accessory structure. Months, I would expect sort of end of summer by the time we have electrical, plumbing, finishing, doors, windows, exterior components completed. So the intent would be to, a desire would be to continue with both structures sort of simultaneously, so that we've got a project that's done and complete by, who knows, December or January of next year.
All right, perfect. Thank you. That adds more clarity. Thank you. Next comments or questions or comments from Member Ferguson.
I think that after all the discussion this morning, the clause that they're putting into the this project does permit the planning department, in order to control the fact that the issue of the bump out will be resolved. And I certainly feel for Mr. Fulford in the way things, trying to obtain building materials these days is probably so frustrating. I certainly don't have a problem with the increased height to the bunkie above the garage, and it's simply because of an engineering mistake. So therefore, I can certainly support this application.
Thank you very much, Member Ferguson. Member Jarvis.
How much time do we have?
You personally?
I appreciate all the information that's been provided, particularly from Mr. Fulford. My first question would be to Josh. Josh, in the justification report that was sent to us in the package, there is a proposed new deck that would be, I think, equivalent in distance from the shore to the bump out that is being contested at this time. Am I correct on that?
Through you, Chair Hill, the approved drawings as per 82106 and the approved drawings of the building permit will allow for a deck to project at the same distance or potentially past the existing bump out. However, the proposed bump out. However, the deck is not necessarily included in the gross floor area. That would be something that will have to be reviewed at the building permit stage to ensure that compliance. I also want to mention that in my report, I conducted the review as I was reviewing the height of the detached garage or sleeping cabin above. So the issue of non-compliance with the bump out, although it is relevant to the condition in terms of, you know, getting that resolved, it was not reviewed in terms of influencing my approval or planning department's approval for this application.
Okay, but it is something you'd be looking at again at some point in time, correct?
Through you, Chair Hill, of course, yes. When we receive the revised drawings, we will look at it again, yes.
Okay. I can only appreciate now the frustration that Mr. Fulford has to go through now to actually do a removal on that bump out. That can't be fun. Oddly enough, that garage looks a lot like the addition I've got on my cottage. Same zip panels and same state of construction. I'm waiting on windows too, so I can sympathize in that regard. My understanding is that we're looking at a 0.6 meter difference in height on the garage. I've got that correct, Josh?
Through you, Chair Hill, that is correct. The applicant is seeking relief to permit a 0.6 meter increase to the already permitted 5.1 meter height of the detached garage or sleeping cabin above.
Yeah, I can see where that would be on from a visual standpoint. Not much of an issue. It is if you go back to the imperial measure of the old days. That's 2 feet, I believe.
Yeah, it is.
Which is in my mind fairly significant. I'm having a hard time. Wes, can you help me here? Was this just a truss and roof load issue that caused the trusses to end up being bigger than originally planned?
Yeah, the trusses were originally, they're a custom designed truss because you've got a weird bend in them. They're originally drawn at 11 7/8 and they ended up being about 26 inches high. In that 0.6 meters, like full transparency, there's probably 4 or 5 inches of buffer because, you know, again, interpreting the bylaws is like me trying to learn Mandarin at the best of times. It's you know, when you look at grade measurements and maximum or building height measurements, as with all projects, you don't really know what you're going to get until you really get into it, specifically with foundations. So this garage is sitting over a previously existing septic bed. So you've got pretty saturated ground conditions. Everything was approved and signed off for footings in the structure and the 4-foot frost wall that's been completed underneath it. But in the event that there's 4 or 5 inches of grade adjustments, I wanted to make sure we had enough of a buffer so that I wasn't back bothering your group in 4 months' time. Okay, so in fact, the truss differential is not fully reflected in that 0.6 is what we're getting at, right? The truss is about 75% of that difference. Okay. And then we may not need all 0.6. As you said, you've added in a buffer. I appreciate that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think I've got my questions answered. I was very hesitant. I thought maybe somebody was pulling the wool over our eyes on a bunch of this stuff, but Wes's comments have changed my mind on that. So if we go with approval of this as it is, Josh, just for clarification, and I think you've already said this about 3 times, if we approve this, we approve it based on a resolution of that bump out on the cottage, correct?
Through you, Chair Hill, that is correct. That is why we included the condition. So we resolved the issue of non-compliance.
It is in writing. So, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Jarvis. Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my thoughts were along the same as Member Jarvis. Perhaps we're drinking the same Collingwood water. And Wes, thank you for the clarity, because I have a bit of a math brain and I was trying to figure out where the other 4, 5, 6 inches was coming from, trying to do conversion from metric to imperial. And so that makes some sense to have a little bit of a buffer. I guess I'm confused as to whether we go with option 1 with the new condition in C, where the bump out has to be resolved or if we go to deferral. If we approve it with the conditions of sorting out the bump out with the building department, does that mean they can continue with construction? And if we defer, it comes to a complete halt? Or obviously, before this proceeds any further, I'd really like to see this bump out issue resolved. Either it stays or it goes. So I guess I'd ask, Josh seems to have his hand up.
Yes, go ahead, Josh.
Through you, Chair Hill. So the planning department presented 3 options to the committee to consider. The first option is for approval, as planning staff are recommending, with the subject to the conditions. And one of the conditions is to resolve the issue of non-compliance. I want to stress again that the minor variance application you have in front of you today is for the height increase for the detached garage or sleeping cabin above. And that's exactly why we want to ensure that, you know, although we provide the best guidance possible, we also recognize that there are other issues on the lot that need to be addressed as well at the same time. Whether you decide to defer the application, that is the option of the committee today. And the result of which, however, will be similar to that of the approval. So if you were to approve the application today, the conditions will have to be met before the building and planning staff can provide approval on the height increase to detached garage or sleeping cabin above. They are permitted to continue construction on the detached garage or sleeping cabin above in terms of, you know, putting in windows and all those information. I'm not exactly a contractor, so I'm not exactly sure what's involved, but they are permitted to continue to do so. However, with the approval conditions, they have to be met before I can provide that planning approval. If the committee decides that you'd like to defer the application, then we will have to come back to committee to discuss this again at a later time, pending the issue of non-compliance being resolved. There's also another option to reject or deny the application. And if that was decided on by committee today, then the next step will be to ensure that the detached garage, the sleeping cabin above, is in conformity with what the approved drawings are, and that is 5.1 meters in terms of the height.
Okay, thank you, Josh. I haven't heard from everyone yet, but I do have just one other comment that we might add here. I noticed that this application refers only to the additional height for the detached garage. There is no discussion in here of allowing that bump out to remain. So I'm assuming that the applicant has decided not to pursue that. And in which case, all we're doing is making sure that the adjustments are made to the existing foundation in order to be in compliance with the committee decision of A21-06. So with that, I guess we have a few more questions. Are there any questions that are concerned from Member Coutier?
I just wanted to confirm that Member Matthews was finished with his questions.
Well, thank you, Member Coutier. I guess so. I'm still really wrestling with this. To Mr. Member Jarvis's point, on the surface, it appeared almost like the wool's been pulled over eyes 2 or 3 times. Yet there seems to be good explanation for it. And I have no reason to disbelieve Mr. Fulford with his explanations. I want to be perfectly clear in my own mind that our decision today will be in complete compliance with what has been approved. And I guess, I mean, I'm almost asking Mr. Fulford to guarantee that he will eliminate that bump out, which I know he can't do at this point. So that's kind of where I'm wrestling at the moment, and I would happily turn it over to Mr. Coutier for his questions.
Thank you, Member Matthews.
I find myself appreciating some of the conversation we've had in the last 3/4 an hour on this file. We seem to be going at it asking the same thing over and over again, and I don't really want to do it myself. But to me, I'm very clear, and that is that we're asking for 2 extra feet in height permitted for the garage and sleeping cabin combo, and that the bump out will be resolved to the satisfaction of the planning and building department. And I have complete faith that the planning and building department know exactly what the prior decisions were and will come up with a satisfactory resolution, or the applicant may decide to make another application in front of us. But at this point, they're asking for permission to increase the height of the garage sleeping cabin, which it seems to me every member has no issue with of any significance. And that and we're putting a condition in that the bump out is resolved with our planning and building department. And given that condition, I have no problem voting in favor of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Kuchar. I noticed another person has arrived. I see an Aaron Coates. I assume you're either with the applicant or a member of the public. Do you have any questions or comments that you'd like to add to the discussion?
Yeah, I'm just the OA architect that Wes has hired. I'm here with Wes and Noel.
Okay, thank you very much. With that in mind, everyone has had their opportunity to speak. I have a resolution. I have actually 2 resolutions in front of me. One is to approve subject to conditions.
Mr. Hill, sorry, Mr. Jarvis has a hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, do you mind if I just make one other question, if you don't mind?
Certainly, go ahead, Mr. Member Jarvis.
Appreciate that. Wes, maybe you can help me on this. There's again, back in the justification report in the photographs, there is a structure that isn't noted anywhere else. It looks like an upside down roof or a deck between the foundation and the garage. Can you tell me what that is?
That's a gazebo that was mounted on what we believe to be a shoreline deck that happened to be about 30% over the water. So that was a condition of the previously approved minor variance. We removed it. It was sitting up nicely on the shore, and then our fall windstorm took hold of it and flipped it upside down and destroyed it. So unfortunately, we won't be using that going forward. But it is a gazebo that will end up in a garbage bin in the near future. And I just want to make one comment. Our intention, and I can 100% guarantee the committee, is that this bump out will be cut off, or the foundation wall, because the permitted wall exists. It's really just a function of taking a rock saw or chainsaw with a masonry bit to it to cut it off. And we do have a survey from an Ontario land surveyor that has confirmed the permitted front wall does sit 7.5 meters back from the regulated waters mark. So it would have been done months ago had we not undergone this redesign and rescope and waiting for engineering reports and new floor layouts. But I can guarantee the committee it is coming off as soon as possible.
Thank you. I would just suggest that maybe the remains of the gazebo are recyclable as opposed to being thrown out into a bin, given the price of lumber and availability these days. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments before I read the resolution? Okay, seeing none, I will read the resolution, otherwise known as option number 1, to approve the application. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A21-35 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 for 333 Steep Rock Road to permit an increase in the maximum permitted height of a detached garage with a sleeping cabin above of 5.7 meters or 5.1 meters is permitted as per A21-06, subject to the following conditions. A, that municipal taxes be paid to date. B, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan extent, location, and scale and use contemplated in the application. And C, that the applicant resolves the issue of non-compliance regarding the bump out on the principal dwelling to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and the Chief Building Official. And D, that all fees and disbursements, legal, engineering, and planning, if any, incurred by the township with respect to the application be paid by the owner. And E, that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you for all that input, everyone. Thanks for the coverage, Josh, and the input from Mr. Fulford. That concludes that application. And the planning department will notify you accordingly. Okay, we'll just pause for a moment while we adjust the attendance. And I have one more resolution. It is moved by Member Matthews, seconded by Member Denkew. Be it resolved that the committee, the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment does now adjourn at 10:51 a.m. until May 13th, 2022 at 10 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you very much. The motion is carried. Very good. And thank you, everyone.